In talking to George about, my husband, the psychiatrist, about him, he said those kind of people can compartmentalize. And it's like he can do these horrific things over here, and then he can completely compartmentalize and be the church elder over here. And it's almost like, is he lying to himself, like deluding himself to be, I'm some good guy, or,
I think it's that feeling, and he doesn't have the feeling.
They didn't have no feeling. And that was exactly what I saw when I saw him on that video testifying in court, and I mean, he just stood there and rattled it off.
Yeah, like
he might as well just been reading
how could he do that? Yeah, most of us say, how could he do that?
I know. And I also have to say, I look at the attorneys standing next to him and go, how can you even stand next to that guy? Not that the sociopathic cooties are going to jump off of him and onto you, but it's just like, I just don't know that I could do that. So
most attorneys, in my opinion, want justice, and they, if they feel they have someone who's that way, they'll make sure they get sent off.
Oh, yeah, true. Even though they have to do their job and all of that, they're going to.
Casey Anthony's one of her defense attorneys who had left the case about a year or two ago said that the girl is innocent. She's not guilty of the charges. And both the lead attorneys that she had for her defense both say she did not do this. She is innocent. Who did? I don't know.
Right.
Yeah,
And
the attorneys believe it.
Yeah, I can understand having to defend someone you don't necessarily believe is innocent, but I would agree. What I've seen is they both absolutely believe she is.
And her former attorney who was on the case, who has no reason to say that publicly.
Is that a female or a male?
Yes, it was
I think
female.
I saw her,
yeah.
female.
And she
said
she's
that
innocent.
too. She's innocent. I think I saw her.
So,
yeah, interesting.
Who did it? The father? And because it was his duct tape on the bag, and did he put the bag in her car, and did she not know that bag was in her trunk? And,
right.
I mean, the father would have been home, the mother would have been working, Casey would have been out doing her thing, and so if the girl drowned in the pool, the father could have pulled her out, but who knows? Yeah.
And that's what haunted me about the OJ thing was, or even like, let's go into another situation like Joan Ramsey. I just wish there was a way to know the truth, and who can tell us, because that's always for me, it's always, what is the truth here? And I had an interesting conversation this morning with someone that I'm maybe hoping to get on the show, but this is a young person who's done very well in her life, a professional person in town, has gone to school, became a registered nurse. Her mother was put into jail for killing her father almost 14 years ago, and adamantly believes to this day that she was, she was put in as an innocent person. And the mother was told, if you admit to this, we'll make sure you're only in for 10 years. She said, I didn't do it. Well, so she's in for about 17, and she's been in for 14 now, which she'd have been out if she'd have admitted, but she did not do it. And it was a compelling story to even listen to. Someone here that's, because innocent people do get put in jail. And if Casey Anthony is innocent, I certainly wouldn't want that for her or anyone. But there again, it's not a perfect science. It's not a perfect, jury system isn't a perfect system, but it is our system that we have to honor and respect. So
I think the Ohio governor just commuted all death penalties to life because too many people are dying who are executed who are not guilty.
Well, we're going to finish up with 5 minutes, and it seems like it goes really fast. So that's going to go very fast. So, well, we're back with Joan and Richard Burnett talking about sociopathy. This is the Joan Jerkovich Show. Comes on 910 KINA. For outtakes, go to joanyerkovich.com, and to listen on your computer, go to salinapost.com, and they do live streaming. So we were kind of having some interesting conversation for the video about BTK and how dispassionate he was as he just sort of recited, his litany of offenses. And I talked about something about, you know, do you see how sociopaths can compartmentalize? I mean, there are people hiding in our churches, or could be hiding in our church or a church, that's then going out, because obviously that was his story.
Yes, he was an elder in his church. Yes, and people who do not have the feeling have that ability to put things in boxes and say, well, that belongs there, that's just that.
And very interesting too, that they were some of the most shocked people to find out it was him, because they've been looking for 20-some years for this killer. And the church pastor or whatever was interviewed, and he talked about his absolute, and the neighbors and the wife, so they can just turn it on and off, like we've kind of been talking, turn on a dime.
The wife, I'm not sure. I think
Really?
she may have had some sniffing of things. You know, there was a shed on the property that she was not allowed to go into. And she didn't go into it. And so you have to wonder, living with the person over such a long time, and the children did not seem to jump to his defense either. So I don't.
You heard a little bit about that, because there was very little came out about the mother, the wife, and the children. So you have a sense they had a little suspicion.
Or knew something
was amiss, right?
Like Lee Anthony does with his mother and father and sister.
Well, and we talked about, going through just a few more of the things that on this checklist that we haven't hit yet before we close. Impulsive, I did it because I felt like it. All about their immediate satisfaction, pleasure. You've seen that, right? Poor behavior controls. How about this? They're highly reactive to criticism or perceived insults. Highly reactive to any criticism. Have you seen that?
Again, one has to wonder what happened while they were growing up, so that they were they over-criticized, or were they told that's a bad thing to do, but then given a sucker to suck on? Or what kind of situation went on there where they somehow come to believe that criticism is a bad thing?
Right. And very short-tempered with anger and aggressiveness that's extreme as related to the actual offending incident.
Leads to murder.
Yeah, I mean, and it can be just you stole my parking place. Some of these stories that I read about were just like, are you serious? Well, they mouthed off to me. So, they're talking about people who might have had an incident in the bar. And so, people can say all sorts of fun, silly things like that. But then to resort to extreme violence over someone just verbalizing something. Like that hair trigger, poor behavior controls.
And is that taught, or is that nature? In that book, Lethal Warrior, they talk about some of the soldiers from that Band of Brothers battalion who wound up with 60-year sentences in Colorado State Prison because they decided they would take care of people lethally when they were upset.
And it's interesting too, because you can talk about all sorts of extremes, but not all of these people end up in jail, according to this book I was reading. Many of them just show up being, kind of crooked business people, like Bernie Madoff got caught, but I'm sure there's plenty of Bernie Madoffs out there, right?
Well, I think there's somebody in South Kansas who is facing prison terms over some sort of investment scheme.
Well, and we've heard of doctors who've lost their license, the one with or the pharmacist, whichever it was, that was prescribing medication but selling it, or all those kinds of things come up. And, whether they get caught or not, there's also the ones who maybe resort to spousal or child abuse. So a lot of these sociopaths, maybe they're not necessarily breaching the line of illegal, but they're certainly unethical or immoral or harmful to others.
And
So,
in my opinion, they will get into trouble. Either the spouse will divorce them, the children will disown them, or they'll get arrested, something will.
well,
They're
and
not
that's,
happy people.
they're
in the
not happy.
long run.
Well, I like that, and that's a good note to end on. They're not happy people, and at some point it will catch up with them. So thank you so much, Richard. I mean, it's been wonderful to have you here, and very enlightening to all of us and all of our listeners. So I hope people that listen in want to send us any message, we can get it to you. But you're listening to Joan at the Joan Jerkovich Show, 910 KINA. All right, we went a tiny bit over on that, but you can edit around.
Yeah,
Wow, I
take
tell
out
you
the
what,
bullshit.
yeah, we will. I went through all my notes too, because you're just a wealth of information. But whew. Let me ask you a question about someone that I had heard about who, and could probably have some of these issues or components. As a young person, a teenager was supposed to babysit like a couple of little kids who were actually members of the family, tied them to a tree and ran off to play with the buddies. How's that strike you? You'd work a lot with these adolescents.
Yeah, that's not normal behavior.
Right.
I mean, most teenagers would not do that.
Right.
Babysit. Yeah, so one has to wonder what's going on with that.
Right.
Now, to say they're psychopath or sociopath because of that one thing, I don't know. Yeah.
But that should certainly be something that you would really take note of.
A red flag, an alarm.
big red flag.
Yeah, what are we going to do about this? What's going on with you? You know. Yes.
And so,
again, that happens with parents. They don't seem to notice. They didn't notice Jeffrey Dahmer. The family didn't notice BTK.
Yeah.
I mean, they just don't. Or Casey's mother, you know, oh, you poor dear, you know. She even tried to visit her after trial, and Casey said no.
I know.
So it's like, you know, where does it stop? What's she going to have to do? Kill the mother before the mother believes that there's something wrong here?
Right.
Yeah. So hopefully the
well,
parents
and that's
of
another
that
thing. It said a
teenager-
lot. Yeah, right. And then also it talks about, you know, that's a true story I know about or have heard about. But there's also the parents who might see the sibling abuse and kind of try to back off from it, and, you know, not knowing that, you know, take that seriously. Get help. Find out what you can do to maybe turn that child or that adolescent in a different direction. You know, if you're having some kind of a innate sense or gut feeling that, whoa, that's not normally how, you know, you can get mad at your little brother or sister for stealing your toy truck. You know, if, you know, we said, why would they have the scissors? That was just one of the things we mentioned, because that was one of the things I read. But there again, you know, comes back in some ways to good parenting that are going to take notice, are going to pull the blinders off, not be in denial, not, you know, sit there and try to excuse it.
Or not feel sorry. Oh, you poor boy, you know, you're tied the kids up.
I think that was one, I think that was one of the more profound things you said today, Richard, was where you talk about parents who, you had, I think, 3 things. What were those? Because I think they're worthy of repeating.
Well, you ignore people who ignore, people who...
the parents who ignore the children's bad behavior.
The parents who feel sorry for the kids. And try to bail the kid out.
Try to bail them out.
And the parents who don't know what's going on with their kids.
Oh, they're not supervising.
You know, I remember when I was growing up at the 11 o'clock news back east at the end of the news. Do you know where your child is?
Yeah.
They played that every night.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know even as an employer in this community with my company, Dignity Care Home, there's times I just want to say, please, parents, you know, teach your children that it's important to be on time. I'm sure, you know, teachers felt the same way too.
Right.
You know, don't call them in tardy when they're not, or, you know, don't give them the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
I always try to tell my kids, look, if your teacher's calling me and you're in trouble with me too.
That's what my father always told me. You get in trouble at school, you're getting in trouble. Now, a lot of parents, they're calling up the teacher, what do you mean my child got detention?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My poor child wouldn't do that, you know, and they side with the kids.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, of course, not all those kids who are being parented like that are going to be sociopaths, but you seem to say you're seeing some of that. Is that more in the level of delinquency, or could, if there's a genetic component,
Delinquency leads.
There's a little component to that.
Yes.
And there's also something I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, which there's an interesting website where a psychiatrist married a sociopath, known sociopath, and her big mission in life was that she had a child with this man, and she was so afraid of her child.